When the house is on fire, you have to be authoritative. You cannot be collaborative or supportive then. How to bring about a culture of performance, especially when you're looked down upon, the Harshad Mehta scam of those days.
Correct.
And that really meant that the capital market went nowhere for those 4 years when I was there. I look for people which fits our requirement rather than us changing to fit the requirements of the younger generation.
Hello and welcome to episode 5 of the Leadership Accelerator podcast. We have a very special guest today. I have known Manish for many years, and it's a pleasure and a privilege for me to have a chat with him today. Our guest today, Manish Gupta, is the Managing Director of Jagsonpal Pharmaceuticals Limited. He's also a mentor to the CEO at Nari Pharma. He's also the board member at Solara Active Pharma, and he is an operating partner at Convergent Finance, which is a private equity firm. Thank you, Manish, for joining us. It's a pleasure to have you on our show.
Yeah, thank you, Sailesh. Thank you for calling me in. Really great to be seeing you again after a long time.
Okay, great. So let's proceed. And I would really want to jump into the deep end of the pool right at the beginning, and would really love to know about your professional journey and especially your attraction towards the pharmaceutical sector. So can you take us through your professional journey so far?
I think my only attraction to pharmaceutical sector was that I married a woman or my wife is from the industry, but getting into the pharma industry was a pure coincidence.
Oh, wow.
So it was, if you recollect, I think we started our careers more or less around the same time in
Correct.
early 90s.
That's right.
And like a true MBA student, I joined consultancy in those days,
Okay.
looking at trying to advise a lot of companies and people. But very soon I realized that's not what I'm meant for. And I dabbled in capital markets for 4 years.
Okay.
Incidentally, that was the time when the first scam of liberalized India happened, which was the Harshad Mehta scam of those days.
Correct.
And that really meant that the capital market went nowhere for those 4 years when I was there. So at that time, in came an opportunity to be a member of chairman's office in Wokhad, which was one of the leading pharmaceutical companies then.
Okay.
I won't say I had any foresight to it, but purely coming out of boredom of the capital markets, I took up that opportunity. And as I would say, rest was history. It coincided with, in a way, the best times of pharmaceutical industry, wherein Indian companies started looking out or westward for growth. The talent in the industry was very limited and very inward looking. And I, coming from maybe an MBA finance background and with a small stint in both capital markets as also consultancy, I ended up taking up opportunities which the internal team was not willing to take. And that kind of set up my growth journey in the company. So much so that within maybe 5 to 7 years of me joining the company, I was leading businesses. Most of the initial leadership that I got an opportunity was actually outside India. So Indian companies or Wokhad actually expanded a lot outside India for lack of talent. I would say I got that opportunity to lead those businesses, and that's how I made my career. Of course, and now it has been almost 25 years plus in the pharma industry, and 20 years of that has been in leadership roles. Working with 3 entrepreneurs, or actually 2 entrepreneurs in pharma, or a long stint of 12 years in Wokhad, and another 14 years with another serial entrepreneur in pharma industry, which is Arun Kumar. So that has been my real journey in pharmaceuticals.
Oh, wow. So what would you say were some of the defining moments for you or defining experiences that really shaped you as a leader?
So there has been plenty, and I must admit that I've learned by experience and in a hard way.
Hmm.
Because uh, so if you take a step back and look back of early 2000, India was not a brand that it is today.
Correct.
And any Indian company acquiring outside India and an Indian manager coming there to lead operations was seen very, very suspiciously.
Correct.
It was seen as that the operations there will be closed down and all jobs will be taken away. The mindset was purely cost arbitrage in those days. That
Hmm.
we obviously were, I mean, hundred of us used to take the cost of one guy in Europe or in US. So there was a big cost arbitrage, and therefore we were seen in a very negative way in those early days. So getting
Okay.
accepted in those culturally different environment and to some extent hostile environment was
Hmm.
probably my biggest learning experience. How to make get work done from in
Mm.
that environment, how to
Correct.
create a organization built on performance, because obviously when we acquired these were underperforming organizations. So
Okay.
how to bring about a culture of performance, especially when you're looked down upon or not as acceptable as you would have been if you were from another country, was one
Right.
of my biggest learnings. But at the end, I think it's your performance that really brings or gets you accepted in any environment. When you lead by example, when you do the right things for the local organization, that's what I
Correct.
think made me getting accepted at those organizations and helped me flourish in those environments. So,
Okay.
in my view, that managing cultures, uh, especially global cultures, and in a very different environments in the terms of performance, the way performance is looked at was my
Correct.
biggest learning in these uh, initial part of my grooming.
Yeah, so you mentioned leading by example, and I'm really keen to know. And you also mentioned the very difficult situations that you had to probably deal with in terms of going and managing underperforming companies in foreign land. Did you have any mentors or people, role model that you really looked up to who kind of helped you during that period of time, which will probably help you kind of gain credibility and also probably develop your own style of leadership?
So I don't think I had a specific mentor in those days, but yes, I have been observing all my managers all along,
Hmm.
especially the entrepreneurs. So one interesting aspect which I must mention before I dive into this question is while I started my journey in a professional organization, I think very soon I found that my real groove, I mean, where I fit well is working with entrepreneurs. And uh, I mean, after a 1 year stint in a so-called professional organization, is when I joined entrepreneurial organizations, which were wherein there was one person driving the organization. And what I really learned by observing him, why these companies perform, is because the leader is highly confident about himself and is not threatened by anybody.
Correct.
While in a managerial organization, a manager is always, I mean, trying to create his own team so that he's more acceptable, and some kind of coteries get formed. While an
Hmm.
entrepreneur doesn't need any coterie, he knows what he is doing is only for
Correct.
the in the interest of himself and or his business. So
Right.
therefore, and for me, that kind of indirect mentorship of working with entrepreneurs helped because when you do the right things for the organization, whether popular or even hard, I think employees or the team members tend to accept it, albeit reluctantly to begin with. And that for me was the kind of mentorship, I would say, not by design, but purely by working
Sure.
with entrepreneurs. Help.
Sure. So, how would Manish you describe your style of leadership? What is it that you kind of are very conscious about, and what are the values probably that uh, create that style of leadership for you?
So I believe I do not have any style. Uh,
Okay.
I'm very, very flexible in one way.
Hmm.
I'm authoritative when needed. I'm collaborative when needed, and I'm supportive when needed. And again, this has come from experience because I've handled organizations which were on the verge of bankruptcy. I've handled well performing organizations and helped them grow to the next level of performance. And I've also helped shape up organizations from one line vision, as we did in animal health, wherein we created India's largest animal health company out of a
Hmm.
single line vision given by one of the promoters.
Okay.
So I think that has allowed me, I won't say by design, but that has made me a very flexible manager. Because when the house is on fire, you have to be authoritative. You cannot be collaborative or supportive then. But when
Correct.
a company is performing, you need a different style to make it grow to the next level. So I would say I'm a blend of course, the blend will keep
More a
changing.
situational kind of a leader is
I
what
would say that.
would be appropriate. Okay. And what kind of values do you hold really dear to the culture that you really look to set in your organization?
So this is a very tough question because it's better answered by my colleagues rather than myself. But I think what the kind of culture I want to build in an organization is that the organization comes first, the organization comes second, and organization comes third in the entire scheme of framework. So
Mhm.
anything that is good for the organization uh, has to be done. And when I say that, I mean it in a larger framework. Okay, it's not
Okay.
about profits.
Hmm.
It's about making a difference in whatever space that we are operating. So, uh, and my actions are determined by that. So, being in pharmaceutical industry, I'll give you an example.
Okay.
Obviously, we take care of healthcare of people. Quality product is of utmost importance.
Absolutely.
So now, when you're manufacturing a drug and your acceptable limit is 95 to 100% in terms of drug efficacy, and something comes at 94.99,
Hmm.
that's when I think that's a biggest dilemma that can come to a leader. Whether it is an acceptable product or is it something that you have to chuck and you can lose a couple of $100,000 or whatever amount that may be associated with. So the way I have built up my organization is like walking the talk and taking those calls in those times, and that level of uh, decision making in the interest of the organization. I mean, this interest is actually financially not in the interest of the organization, but you take call in the long term interest of the organization. And that's the kind of culture I try to imbibe in all my colleagues and teammates, which is
Okay.
about value driven, uh, being a responsible citizen as an organization.
Okay. So, what really kind of I'm curious to know, Manish, is Jackson Paul probably happened around 3 years back,
Yeah, a little over 2 years back.
a little over 2 years back. So, and that was a setup which was an existing setup which you entered or which you got into. What were your challenges in an already existing setup with an already existing culture? And when you got in, you obviously probably needed to make some changes so that it aligns with your vision for the organization. So, what were those challenges that you had?
Again, I won't say there were any specific challenges because, as I mentioned, generally when you talk organizational language, people change. And therefore, I also, while Jagsonpal was a legacy company, 45 years plus existence, a family run company, a lot of family members still involved in business when I took over, the change was easy because I
Mhm.
only talked of organizational performance and organizational matters and nothing more than that. Further, never in a hurry to make the changes on day one. I take my own time to understand the nuances, understand the pros and cons of the people that I'm with, and I never bring my own team. I generally try to adapt the same team that I inherit. And
Okay.
that was the case with Jagsonpal also. And Sailesh, I must admit that while I have probably managed some 8 or 10 such organizations in my last 15 years, I've
Mhm.
never been let down by people. People adapt. Once they see that what you're doing is right for the organization, people change.
Wonderful. So, Manish, what do you really focus on as a leader when it comes to developing your team, building your team, right from, let's say, what do you look at when you're hiring people? Or once you have hired people, how do you ensure that they align to the company's vision and the mission and the values so that you have a vibrant, motivated, and impactful team of people?
Yeah. So fundamentally, I spend a lot of time in right hiring. And especially for the core team, I am driven more not by the CV, but by my personal engagement with them during the interview process. Uh, Typically, I tend to hire younger people,
Hmm.
people who are not in the top management grade as yet, but who are
Okay.
aspiring to be there. So they
Okay.
are the ones who are hungry, generally. They are the ones who are wanting to prove at the next level. Okay. And at the same time, they carry less baggage in my way of looking at things. Because people like us, over the years, we do build up our own baggage. So, uh, what I'm looking
Correct.
for is people who do not carry baggage, who are therefore adaptable. And that is where I hire first. It is for their attitude rather
Hmm.
than their existing skill. Because most of the time, I think skills can be built up, but attitude cannot be
Okay.
changed. So that's how I've built up my organization. I don't carry any of my team members of the past, and I generally
Hmm.
stay with 90% of the current resources and maybe a couple of new hirings for the missing gaps.
While I hear what you are saying, Manish, and let me tell you, lot of entrepreneurs and some of our people who are listening into our podcast would be really keen to know how do you assess with for attitude, or how do you assess for the cultural fit, because it's easier said than done. A lot of people talk about, yeah, we should hire for attitude, we should hire for the right kind of culture and behavior. How do you assess that? Because a lot of entrepreneurs talk about the need to hire for the right set of people in terms of attitude. Isn't it a difficult task? What kind of strategies do you really use to do that?
Yeah, so see, I think this part I would say comes a little from experience and little from patience. Okay,
Okay.
so uh, if you have a pressure to hire, I think you tend to make mistakes.
Hmm.
So first and foremost, my single line agenda which I give to my HR team is uh, don't give me numbers. Normally, typically they say 20 vacancies, 18 filled, 2. I
Correct.
absolutely don't believe in that kind of number philosophy. We are
Mhm.
not dealing with bodies. We are dealing with real emotions and real skill sets. Uh,
Absolutely.
okay, so and for all my key hirings, I personally spent time. And wherein, okay, I don't think I have any special skill or anything, but it's just that most of the time you can figure out what is that guy joining you for. Or uh, so one thing which Selesh I have adopted very, very well is I always hire people with a salary cut, especially for my key positions.
Hmm.
So normally an HR guy will say he's driving this much and let's give him a 20% raise. I have hired people at least for all my key roles at salaries that were lower than what they were drawing in their last.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
How do you manage that?
yeah. And I'm very candid with them. If you want good work, come and join me. If you are coming for money, then this is not the right place.
Okay.
And okay, it doesn't work all the time, but whomsoever I hire, they end up staying with us because the philosophy is anyway, if he's joining for money, he'll also leave for money.
Correct.
And at this level, at really that last 5 lakh and 10 lakh honestly does not make any difference. So
So
unless
you're
some,
talking about the very senior level position.
no, I'm talking of positions which matter to me. And I mean, for me, even a 25, 30 lakh position is material. And
Hmm.
we have been able to hire people at same or lower salaries even at those levels. Uh, it's not with the intent that I want to pay them less.
Okay.
It really shows how serious are they about the organization because they've also done homework.
Hmm.
So if somebody says I'm not really looking for a change, but since this came up and therefore I'm here, I don't entertain it.
Hmm.
Okay, so I said if you are happy with where you are, why should I hire you? I mean, why I'm not going to offer you anything obnoxious for you to be here.
Hmm.
So for me, it's a matter of patience. It's matter of attitude, matter of dissatisfaction with the way they are working today. And
Hmm.
in our company, generally, and this is one strong learning I had picked up from Arun Kumar, we benefit employees out of a very robust employee stock option program, which is all
Okay.
encompassing, which is fairly significant. And therefore, if the outcome is good, because finally we are here to create value, if the
Hmm.
outcome is good, everyone in the end makes money, but not at the front.
Okay. But what is that end? So when you talk about a ESOP program, how do you design? And this is more for the audience who probably struggle to retain good talent, and that's always been a challenge. How do you design, and what are the elements of a good ESOP program that works effectively?
See, again, it depends on the stage of the organization. Uh, uh, I have handled listed companies, so there is something more visible as far as ESOP is concerned. Because a guy who is joining can look at it and can really evaluate. But fundamentally, I don't think there is a right answer to your question. You have to design as per the needs of the organization. It's a it's a tool for both retention and value creation. And
Correct.
at the end of it, the outcome should be sufficiently large to take care. See, typically, the way I see it is the biggest challenge of a human being today is having a good house.
Right.
Okay. And if you can create something which can help him buy a house after 4 years,
Hmm.
based on whichever level he is, I think that's a good outcome for an ESOP. So
Okay.
I link it with a value that is sufficient enough to buy a house at the level he is in.
Okay. So that brings me, Manish, to a question that I've seen a lot of people grapple with, and what I've seen is as the generations have progressed, the current generation is really looking, or the needs of the current generation, let me put it this way, is far different from probably our generation or the generation before us, right? And then what they're really looking for is a career. What they are looking for is flexibility. What they are looking for is good career growth and rewards and recognition. So how do you kind of work around this? Because that the role of a leader therefore has evolved from what it was probably 20 years back. How have you kind of tried to maneuver yourself into ensuring that the current set of employees are really taken care of? The Gen
Yeah.
Z or the
Yes.
millennials?
So, fortunately, I'm not in an industry which needs too many of Gen Zs. But
Okay.
I will address it a bit differently because the pharmaceutical industry hasn't changed even after 40 years. The way of working
Mhm.
remains same. Uh, our younger lot very excited to join the pharmaceutical industry? Answer is no. Okay, it doesn't have the
Correct.
lifestyle that is probably offered at other industries. Okay, or
Correct.
some of the new gen industries. But the way I look at this entire aspect is we are 1.4 billion people. Whatever is the number of employable people is still a sufficient pool. All I need is a few hundred people for my organization. And how do I get those 100 people or 25 people actually who share my way of thinking and working is what I'm looking for. So rather than trying to change myself or the working environment to fit a Gen Z, slight changes, of course, we do. But I would rather pick up the guys which fit the pharmaceutical culture
Correct.
because come what may, this industry is slightly different, and fortunately or unfortunately, it still hasn't changed in spite of whatever changes have occurred in the world otherwise. So I may not be the right guy to answer the question that you have, but for me, I look for people which fits our requirement rather than us changing to fit the requirements of the younger generation.
So I'm curious to know how did, and I know you probably joined Jagsonpal post COVID, but in the sector, in the industry, how did it kind of shape the industry? The pandemic, and then the so people started work, and then a lot of other industries started working from home. Remote working became the norm of the day. How has it impacted your sector?
So, as a as myself or my previous, because during COVID I was in Sequent Scientific, which was my earlier organization.
Right.
We were the first ones to start work from office on the day one of when it was allowed.
Okay.
Okay, and believe me, while the first 10 days were tough, after that everyone wanted to come back to office, and they were happier in office rather than working from home.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, without a single exception. Now, pharmaceutical industry, of course, we were exempt from a lot of restrictions of the COVID lockdown because of the essential nature of this industry.
Correct.
And we all of us can understand if we had followed from home for the workers, there wouldn't have been any pharmaceutical products available in this country.
Correct.
So this industry did undergo a period of change.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. But again, we are back to more or less the same way of working as it was prior to COVID. Okay. The
Okay.
only change that has occurred is a lot of L&D initiatives. The training initiatives are now conducted online
Mm-hmm.
versus the physical trainings that were undertaken in the past. Otherwise, in terms of way of working, we are back to normal because the representative has to go and meet up the doctor. Uh,
Right.
Doctors are willing to take all the calls that are required. The production has to continue the same way. the R&D, everything has to continue the same way as it was in the past. So I would say 90% of the industry working is back to normal, the same way as it was being done in the past. Only a couple of things which, I mean, typically where you can avoid travel, that has now become a habit simply for saving cost rather than anything else.
Absolutely. Right. So we talked about COVID, and we talked about, obviously COVID was an unprecedented kind of a situation, and a lot of leaders really grappled for the right answers. And I'm sure there were no right answers at that point of time. But for you, in a situation of uncertainty, how do you work around the decision making part, and what would be your advice to other leaders in terms of taking tough decisions during periods of uncertainty?
Yeah. So I think when COVID hit, none of us knew what will happen next.
Correct.
Okay. And uh, I operated Sequent at that point of time. And um, I was somewhere a bridge between an entrepreneur and the professional management.
Right.
So I personally had no stake in the company excepting the ESOPs, but I obviously had all the backing of the entrepreneur who funded the organization. And clearly, I had responsibilities to both,
Correct.
not being unreasonable to the entrepreneur and also being fair to the organization.
Correct.
So, till the uncertainty, and again, I must admit that the team stood up. So, what we did, the only step we did was anybody above a particular threshold of salary, we took a serious pay cut on day one, and it
Mhm.
was a deferred pay.
Okay.
Okay, because there was uncertainty, nobody knew how long it will last or whether it will be permanent. Rather than letting go people, we said, uh, and any which way in organizations now, the leadership account for significant part of the salaries.
Correct.
So, uh, and generally actions are taken at the lower end. So what we did was deferred the salary up to 50% of salaries were delayed or deferred at the leadership to protect all the juniors.
Right.
Also, we took a lot of steps to protect the juniors in terms of enhanced insurances and all that,
Hmm.
because that was a period of great uncertainty. And these were the guys who were actually braving COVID and coming to the facilities for production.
Correct.
Okay, so uh, we offered them food so that they could work in the factory, stay longer hours. Actually, you will be surprised that kind of challenges these guys who wanted to come to the factory they faced were unbelievable because villagers were not allowing them to go to the factories for
Hmm.
the fear of COVID.
Okay.
And what I really learned is if you take care of your real workers,
Right.
come what may, things come back. And within 3 months, we had the courage to actually restore the salaries.
Great. Manish, you briefly mentioned the L&D activities that you have in and which have now gone on more online. Uh, what do you think is, or what, in your opinion, how important is upskilling and developing your team a critical factor for a leader to be really able to build a great team?
So I think this is a journey.
Right.
Upskilling is a journey. I think you and I are still learning.
Absolutely.
Every engagement is learning. And learning, in my scheme of things, is need not have a structured framework.
Mhm.
Okay? It's not that 360 days I don't learn and then 5 days suddenly I go to a training program.
Correct.
Okay, when I'm expected to learn. So for me, learning is a journey. It's a daily process. I learn from even watching my security guard and the peons in the company versus learning from watching our leaders. Okay.
Right.
Uh, Having said that, based on need, there is a need of certain structure to that learning. And these can be in the form of, typically we promote people. Okay.
Mhm.
While we promote in terms of designation and sometimes even the role, and that is more by, like, every 3 years it is expected that a promotion is in the order. But what we do not ensure is, are we skilling him for that role? And
Okay.
that's where I think a very structured L&D programs comes in the play. Okay, so for me, rather than doing L&D as a complete initiative across the organization, I do it on need basis, supporting people to take the next level of responsibilities, not
Right.
giving them on platter. I mean, give them on platter, but you have to make them succeed and not make them fail. Same is in the case of our recruitments, because in pharmaceutical industry, we recruit people who have to go and face the doctor, and
Okay.
therefore they need to have good strong understanding of science compared to what they are taught in their colleges. So that's where a strong L&D initiative spending fair bit comes in, and of course upskilling them across their journey, uh, but more on a case to case basis on what is the requirement of that particular person, rather than having standard programs across the organization.
Okay. And let's get more specific to leadership positions. And you act or you are a mentor to the CEO at Nari Pharma. What do you see the role of a mentor or a coach, and how important is that role? And how should leaders really look at it? Do you think leaders should look at mentoring and coaching as a way to upgrade themselves or upskill themselves? Do you think it's something that is what every leader should be really looking out for?
So, Selesh, I think all our life we are mentoring somebody or the other, right? And
Right.
somebody is being a mentor of us, be it at
Correct.
home and be it in the organization. So
Correct.
I think mentoring by itself, I'm here because somebody mentored me, either officially or unofficially.
Right.
Uh, and same is the case. So whether you have an official mentor or not is not really, you can always seek help or seek guidance on, and it's not about getting an answer,
Hmm.
it is about brainstorming.
Correct.
Okay, so I as a mentor, I don't give any solutions to the CEO. He
Hmm.
comes and discusses with me, and he himself finds the answers, or I only support him in his decision making.
Right.
Gives Give him various other alternatives as well. So for me, mentoring is a way of life. At any point of time, you need it, and you are also a mentor to somebody or the other in your life. So that's the way I look at it.
Great. And so one of those very cliched lines I'm going to use, and that's about entrepreneurship being a lonely journey. An entrepreneur is lonely a lot of times. Do you agree to that, or do you think and then therefore having mentors or coaches, people who they can go to and speak to, kind of even went out at some point of time? Does that really help? In the first place, does that? Do you agree that entrepreneurship is a lonely journey?
Partly true.
Okay.
You certainly start lonely, but if you build a good team or some like-minded people, I think it becomes not that lonely thereafter.
Hmm.
Okay. Having said that, obviously, when you have people with you or under you, most of the times they will have some agenda or the other,
Right.
and whatever said and done, it is their job, and they are not looking at exactly the way entrepreneur is looking. So
Hmm.
to some extent, you do need support, uh, and that's where I think the journey gets lonely to some extent. So it's a blend. It's not as lonely as it can be, or it can be made out to be. But at the same time, sometimes it is lonely, especially when very, very hard decisions have to be
Difficult
taken.
time. Yeah.
Difficult times. Yeah.
Okay. Last question, and I'm going to really put you in the spot. And it's something that is probably relevant to both of us. We are now, we are the late entrepreneurs. We started off late as entrepreneurs. Do you think the journey of entrepreneurship continues beyond the 60s or probably even into the 70s? Or do you think that every professional needs to have a hard stop at some point of time and say, okay, I'm done with this and I'm moving on?
So I don't have a good answer for you, but I'll give you my own case.
Okay.
When we started our careers, and I'm sure same must have been with you, all of us had a goal by 40 or 50, I would retire and hang my boots. Okay.
Absolutely.
Right.
Correct.
Uh, at 50 or 45, I think I had all the fair financial wherewithal to hang my boots. But today, I believe this entrepreneurship or making an organization is what keeps me growing. Okay,
Mhm.
it has become like a passion,
Correct.
and I think till my legs support me, or more than legs, the mind supports me. I think I'm there. So I have to
Okay.
be thrown out rather than because it's fun making difference to the lives of the people. See, I
Absolutely. I
today
completely.
when you hire or number of jobs grow in the company, or
Right.
100 people are able to buy a house because of the value that you created in the organization, I think the kick that it gives you is unparalleled. So I don't see an expiry date for an entrepreneur.
Perfect. Great. So I don't see you retiring in the near future.
Yeah,
Uh,
I mean more because of my wife, because she doesn't want me home. So thanks for having me.
Anything else that you want to discuss, Manish?
No, no, I think it has been uh, the most comprehensive engagement that I have ever had. So thanks for having me.
Okay, so thank you, Manish. It was really great to have you on our show, and I'm sure the audience would really take a lot of learning from what you've shared with us, and wish you all the best. Keep batting for as long as you really have that passion going, and all the best to you and to your team at Jagsonpal. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sailesh. And really pleasure engaging or interacting.